Alfonso Cahero, A Journey into Finance History. Chapter 40, U.S. Abandonment of the Gold Standard, 1933. In the early 20th century, the United States stood as a beacon of economic prowess, with its currency backed by the glittering promise of gold. The gold standard, a system where paper money could be exchanged for a fixed amount of gold, was the bedrock of stability and prosperity. As the Roaring Twenties unfolded, America reveled in its newfound wealth and power, with skyscrapers piercing the skies and jazz melodies filling the air. The gold standard was a symbol of trust and stability. It provided a tangible anchor for the value of money, instilling confidence in investors and consumers alike. With gold reserves safeguarding the nation's currency, the economy flourished, fueled by innovation, industrialization, and an insatiable appetite for progress. But beneath the surface of prosperity lurked the seeds of economic turmoil. The stock market crash of 1929 shattered the illusion of invincibility, plunging the nation into the abyss of the Great Depression. Banks shuttered their doors, businesses collapsed, and millions were thrown into unemployment and poverty. Amidst the chaos, the gold standard stood as a symbol of rigidity, constraining the government's ability to respond to the crisis. The gold standard, once a pillar of strength, now seemed like a straitjacket, binding policymakers to outdated monetary policies. As deflation gripped the economy and credit evaporated, the constraints of the gold standard became increasingly apparent. Unable to print more money or devalue the currency, the government found itself powerless in the face of economic freefall. Into this maelstrom stepped Franklin D. Roosevelt, the newly elected president with his bold vision for change. The New Deal promised relief, recovery, and reform, aiming to lift America out of the depths of despair. Yet, Roosevelt faced a dilemma: how to reconcile the gold standard with his ambitious plans for economic revitalization. Roosevelt recognized that clinging to the gold standard would only prolong the suffering of the American people. He knew that bold, decisive action was needed to break free from the shackles of the past and chart a new course for the nation. With unwavering determination, he set out to challenge the status quo and reshape the future of the American economy. With his reassuring voice crackling through the radio waves, Roosevelt captivated the nation with his fireside chats. In these intimate broadcasts, he explained his policies directly to the American people, forging a bond of trust and confidence. As the Depression deepened, Roosevelt knew he needed to take decisive action to restore faith in the economy. The fireside chats became a lifeline for millions of Americans, offering reassurance in a time of uncertainty. Roosevelt's calm demeanor and clear communication style helped to quell fears and instill hope, laying the groundwork for the monumental changes that lay ahead. As the nation tuned in to listen, Roosevelt prepared to unleash a wave of sweeping reforms that would reshape the economic landscape forever. In March 1933, Roosevelt declared a bank holiday, closing all banks to prevent a run on deposits. With the nation's financial system on the brink of collapse, he pushed Congress to pass the Emergency Banking Act, which granted the government unprecedented powers to stabilize the banking sector. Yet, the gold standard remained a stubborn obstacle, hindering Roosevelt's efforts to jumpstart the economy. The Emergency Banking Act was a crucial first step in Roosevelt's plan to restore confidence in the banking system. By temporarily suspending banking operations and implementing strict regulations, Roosevelt aimed to weed out corruption and restore trust in the financial system. However, without addressing the underlying flaws of the gold standard, Roosevelt knew that the economy would continue to languish in the grip of depression. As Roosevelt grappled with the complexities of the economic crisis, he faced mounting pressure to abandon the gold standard. Yet, the decision was fraught with risk, with critics warning of dire consequences if the nation strayed from the path of gold-backed currency. Roosevelt knew that he needed to tread carefully, weighing the potential benefits against the potential pitfalls of such a radical departure from tradition. The gold standard had been a cornerstone of economic policy for decades, enshrined in law and upheld as a symbol of fiscal responsibility. To abandon it would be to challenge the very foundations of the American economy, risking a backlash from investors and policymakers alike. Yet, Roosevelt was undeterred, determined to do whatever it took to rescue the nation from the grip of depression. In April 1933, Roosevelt took bold and decisive action to break free from the constraints of the gold standard. With the stroke of a pen, he signed Executive Order 6102, effectively outlawing the private ownership of gold and requiring citizens to surrender their gold coins, bars, and certificates to the government. The move sent shockwaves through the nation, as Americans grappled with the implications of this unprecedented act of government intervention. The gold confiscation was a controversial and divisive measure, sparking outrage among gold owners and libertarians who saw it as a violation of property rights. Yet, Roosevelt defended the decision as a necessary step to stabilize the economy and restore confidence in the financial system. By centralizing control over the nation's gold reserves, Roosevelt hoped to gain greater flexibility in managing the money supply and implementing his New Deal policies. With the nation's gold reserves now firmly in the hands of the government, Roosevelt moved swiftly to enact further reforms. In January 1934, he signed the Gold Reserve Act into law, officially abandoning the gold standard and devaluing the dollar against gold. The act gave the government greater discretion in setting the price of gold and paved the way for a more flexible approach to monetary policy. The Gold Reserve Act marked a turning point in American economic history, signaling the end of an era of gold-backed currency and the dawn of a new era of fiat money. By breaking free from the constraints of the gold standard, Roosevelt hoped to unleash the full power of government intervention to combat the Great Depression and put America back on the path to prosperity. The abandonment of the gold standard had far-reaching implications for the American economy, reshaping the landscape of finance and commerce for generations to come. Without the constraints of gold-backed currency, the government gained unprecedented power to manipulate the money supply and intervene in the economy. This newfound flexibility allowed Roosevelt to implement his New Deal programs with greater speed and effectiveness, laying the groundwork for America's eventual recovery from the Great Depression. Yet, the decision to abandon the gold standard was not without its critics. Many feared that the move would lead to runaway inflation and undermine the value of the dollar, while others lamented the loss of a cherished symbol of stability and fiscal responsibility. However, Roosevelt remained steadfast in his belief that bold action was needed to rescue the nation from economic ruin, and history would ultimately vindicate his decision. Despite its demise, the gold standard left an indelible mark on the American economy and the collective psyche of the nation. For decades, it had served as a bulwark against the uncertainties of the market, providing a sense of security and stability in an ever-changing world. Its abandonment marked the end of an era of fiscal conservatism and ushered in a new era of government intervention and monetary experimentation. Yet, the legacy of the gold standard endured, serving as a cautionary tale of the dangers of rigid adherence to outdated economic doctrines. As the world grappled with new challenges and uncertainties, the lessons of the gold standard would continue to resonate, reminding policymakers of the perils of clinging too tightly to the past. In the end, it was the willingness to adapt and innovate that would determine the fate of nations in an ever-evolving global economy. The story of the U.S. abandonment of the gold standard is a testament to the power of leadership in times of crisis. Roosevelt's bold and decisive action saved the nation from the brink of economic collapse and set it on the path to recovery. His willingness to challenge the status quo and embrace change laid the foundation for a new era of prosperity and progress. Yet, the story is also a cautionary tale of the dangers of clinging too tightly to outdated economic doctrines. The rigid adherence to the gold standard exacerbated the effects of the Great Depression, prolonging the suffering of millions of Americans. It was only by breaking free from the constraints of the past that Roosevelt was able to unleash the full potential of government intervention to combat the crisis.